So, welcome everybody. We have somebody joined us already. I don't know who this person is, but I've been following them for a while. It's Alder Byro. Think you're up in. I think she's up in Canada or something.
Oh, nice.
It's pretty cool. Restoration slash like native landscaping. Cool plant pics. Anyway, so everybody, I'm Michael Yadrick, and I'm on Instagram Live here with Sean Rowe, who's the host, the creator and host of Resonant Restoration. I'm tuning in from home base up in Tacoma, Washington. He's down in Humboldt in Northern California. How's it going, Sean?
It's going good. No complaints. It's a little foggy here, but it's always foggy.
It's always foggy. Yeah, I don't know. We had a bit of a rainstorm, and then it's been pretty nice lately. I actually did a overtime shift yesterday at Discovery Park. I've never actually spent that much time in one park it was like a 10-hour overtime shift.
Oh, wow.
In order not really doing ecology work, actually it was a social, and I was being a social distancing ambassador.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if they've done any of that around here.
Right, so as a way to keep the parks open, my job is to go around, me and like a couple hundred of my friends in parks. In order to keep the parks open, we cruise around and compliment people on being social but physically distant from each other, and kick people off the basketball courts or whatnot. But yeah, it's like Discovery Park is one of Seattle's biggest parks, so it was like Disneyland out there. There's a lot of people out, especially
Yeah.
once the sun comes out.
I haven't seen a whole lot of parks around here. I've been kind of not doing a very good job going outside.
Yeah.
But I know the beaches were crowded and then they got closed down, and all the playgrounds have tapes or taped off on the equipment. So people are
Yeah.
doing a good job, I guess.
Yeah, I know. It's like I don't know. We've been locked down for almost a month now, and our stay-home order goes until May 4th, but it may very well go longer. I don't know, but trying to get out to the parks. Lucky our work is essential, right? So we get to go out and
Right.
show up to the nature a little bit, right? So I thought this was a good chance, in addition to the podcast, to get a chance to tune in with people live on video and maybe field maybe I don't know, perhaps there may be very well be some calls or some questions from people who join in. We didn't promote this like a ton, but we're going to record it and hopefully people can watch it a little later perhaps. At first I was really interested in talking a little bit more about, well, your podcast has been going. You have quite a few episodes already, even though you just started a couple months ago, but you're already thinking about another podcast, right?
Yeah, so I started outlining a new podcast about grass and how it impacts the world, culture, society. I mean, grass is everywhere, as you can notice in your lawns, but it's also in beer, bread. It's responsible for LSD to a degree, and there's reports of it being kind of the culprit behind the Salem witch trials, like the fungus that grows on certain types of grass that they derived LSD from. They think it contaminated some of the bread in those populations, and people were hallucinating, and that's why they, you know, freaked out on a huge group of people. And there's also thoughts that it contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire and things like that. So wheatgrass is everywhere, and I think it deserves some talk. So I'm excited to start a new podcast.
Yeah, nice. I know there's some guys on the technical end of sides. I don't know if people are interested in this, but there's you set up your own RSS feed on the other website. I know that sounds super complicated. I'm sure that took a few hours to figure out.
Yeah, so it was pretty simple to figure out how to do a second stream on the RSS or on the website. And I'm happy I have a dedicated website for that reason.
Yeah. And what's your website? Let everyone know what your website is. I think it's a hub of
Yeah,
treasure
so
trove of info.
the resonantrestoration.com is our main website, and we host information there about different community projects. I have some information on native pollinators, some information on doing moth surveys, like do DIY at home, set up a tarp, hang out with the family, shine a light, and look at a bunch of pretty bugs that fly. We also have the ecorestorationnetwork.com, and that website is our hosting for the podcast. And hopefully that'll be developed more so in the future to include other shows and other resources for ecological restoration. And we also just started a store on that website. So if you ever want any restoration related swag, go there.
Right. I saw the swag is awesome. Yeah, I'm in the market for another buff probably.
Nice.
Or
Yeah.
a t-shirt probably, or I don't know. I went shopping for the first time a couple weeks ago, and they wouldn't take my bag, my reusable bag. So I don't know. All those 20 reusable bags we have in the house are going unused at this point in time.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I don't know. But once everything gets back to normal, pick up a Resonant Restoration shopping bag.
Yeah.
Cool.
We also have a discount code. It's Humphrey, HUMPHREY. And that's the name of my producer, which is my cat.
Nice. I'm sure he sounds like he calls the shots.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Yeah, like I said, a few people have joined us, and if anyone wants to ask any questions, I don't know if we haven't really started talking about, we're just chit chatting right now, but we just talked about Sean's potentially new podcast coming out someday about grass. And then, talking about where you can find him on his website at resonantrestoration.com. We had a few things kind of scripted to talk about. There's just one thing that I wanted to remind everyone about because it's a story that I've been tracking. And a lot of times, obviously, we're kind of sucked into our own worlds, but we kind of forget that there's this effort moving towards the years 2021 through 2030 as the decade on ecosystem restoration. And I don't know if you all have listened to the podcast episode that I did in January with Tim Christofferson, who is the coordinator of the decade. I talked to him at his place in Kenya, and he's the head of the United Nations Environmental Program. Anyway, at that point in time, he kind of mentioned this thing like there's a strategy coming out, and it has been out for like a month, and comments from us are due. So if anyone, I know people love strategic plans, and but it is a point in time. I think the decade does seem like this huge thing, and like we may not have much to do with it. But this is an opportunity to, submit your thoughts about how the decade is going to roll out. And so there is this multiple page strategy. It is available at decade on restoration.org. And really comments are like due this week. I won't tell you when, but really like at the end of April. And it's pretty broad reaching strategy and communications documents related to how to save the world. So I don't know if you've taken a peek at it, Sean.
I've taken a brief glance, and I want to read it more so. I don't have any comments that go beyond the suggested ones by the Society for Ecological Restoration.
Yeah, good
And
call.
I think, Michael, you have those on your Instagram.
I do. Yeah, I put them up in the stories, and I can just go over them real quickly. Society for Ecological Restoration International put out a policy update a few weeks back, or maybe a week ago, and made some suggestions about how we could strengthen the overall strategy. And I'll just go through, and there's 5 bullet points essentially. There's like a longer document that they submitted, but there's yeah, just 5 bullet points that if I think maybe we could all agree on. And if you get a chance to go on and just submit comments real quick to the decade, then these are some good ones. So number one would be UN decade funded projects would explicitly promote the restoration of native ecosystems and clearly articulate the need for net gain in healthy ecosystems worldwide. So I think that's something a lot of us work in anyway, and we really focus on native restorations and not just like eucalypt plantations in places where they're not really appropriate. The other one would be articulating a long-term um, theory of change should include discussion of the long-term nature of restoration as compared to the short-term nature of most restoration funding and investment. So really, like this decade, like 2021 through 2030 is just like a snapshot in time. And really, there's going to be some loose ends come 2030. So it's really important to kind of keep those projects going afterwards in sort of the management and maintenance phase. Number 3 would be the implementation of the UN decade should include and acknowledge that the flagship value of many thousands of small restoration projects are equally important to large scale projects. So I think this is the fact that I think, to really make the like worldwide restoration happen, you need investment. So I think it's just trying to make sure that the UN balances these large scale, like pretty projects versus also giving some credence to the small projects. So number 4 would be the need to avoid creating perverse incentives or promoting the potential rebranding of business as usual activities as restoration. So I think that's really important. Now, the SCR distinguishes ecological restoration from ecosystem restoration, and that ecological restoration is a process and there's principles and standards that we all live by, and that it's not sort of just glossed over as sort of like a kind of greenwashing strategy. And number 5, I think, yeah.
I just want to interrupt. So I don't usually hear the distinction between ecological and ecosystem restoration. Is that trying to get like the idea of mitigation out of the classification of ecological?
It could very well be, I don't know much about, and yeah, I don't know. Like, so, like the fact that like mitigation maybe wouldn't count, perhaps.
Yeah, well, so I have a pet peeve or a hard time labeling mitigation as ecological restoration
Mm.
because you're not going into it with the same goals and there's a lot more constraints. And really the purpose is for, mitigating someone's activity or development. You're trying to recreate instead of restore the trajectories or the what was previously there. There's just different kind of mindsets that go along with those two different types of projects, and they can overlap, but not always.
Obviously, I'm not using ecological restoration as the foundation to destroy things that that shouldn't be messed with, right? So, not building gray infrastructure that has a short lifespan and forsaking like the value of the forests or the wetlands that are there that are bulldozed over to yeah, to make way for human development, right?
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
mitigation too. You're doing in kind, so it's like kind of just a picture of what is there, even if it's degraded. Or I mean, the best mitigation is avoidance, right? That's one of the things, well, at least in California. So even if you have a degraded piece of land, avoiding it is mitigation, and that is, by no means restoration.
yeah, right. Okay. So yeah, really the last point that SCR made, point number 5, was that plans for outreach, communications, and engagement could clarify that they will serve key marginalized constituents such as women and indigenous communities, which is super key, right? And even I would say in the strategy, they did call out, but didn't necessarily articulate at length, inclusion of youth. Obviously, like during this, I feel like this past year and rolling into early 2020, like youth have played a key part in combating or at least challenging the status quo about the climate crisis and the lack of action on climate. So I feel like youth is a pretty important piece of the strategy moving forward, as well as like elderly. I would even include like LGBTQ peoples as well. So, but we know indigenous community, like women, inclusion of women, like vetting of projects, and inclusion of women in projects makes projects, restoration projects, more successful. And then as well as indigenous communities as well, like lots of land out there is under the stewardship of indigenous communities, and um, we can't roll forward with projects without their voice and really their stewardship moving forward, because some of the most successful restoration projects in the world are ones that roll with the First Peoples. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the indigenous folks down here, they have entire departments, or like they have more of a focus on restoration and are familiar with those integral plants and moving parts. So it's great to see. We just saw the city of Eureka give back an island to the Wiyot tribe, the Tulawat Island, and I'm really excited to see what happens in the future with that project.
Nice. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I should look more into that. That sounds great. You don't see examples of giving back land very often.
No, no.
Uh, so, so we talked about it a little bit, but as far as my day yesterday, working on, or just day to day working on restoration during this coronavirus pandemic, how's your work changed?
It's strange. So we've seen a couple people kind of drop out because they're scared financially, so their projects kind of just disappeared. And that's more of like the private folks, or in the private sector. And it's been hard to schedule interviews for some reason. I would think people would have more time on their hands, but I think people are spending less time in their offices and maybe not concentrating on email logistics as much. There's probably a variety of reasons.
Mm.
And then there's a big project I usually am involved in Mendocino County, it's a mitigation project for a bypass of 101. And so we do monitoring every year with the other company I work for. And it's been delayed, because of shelter in place and all that. So hopefully
Mm.
and it's a fun project. I really want to get down there and see what plants are doing. And if we miss windows, it's going to be a shame because, that's a whole year missed.
Right, right. Yeah, and it's interesting how this our sort of work, how it works in. I feel like obviously it's important for people to stay home and to flatten the curve and not overwhelm the healthcare system. However, Yeah, windows, like you talk about missing windows. Like there's noxious weeds that have some public safety impacts potentially if they are continue to grow, and especially if the parks are open and some of these weeds continue to grow. I mean, people are could become like in physical contact with some of these weeds, like poison hemlock, which we became a regulated weed up in our neck of the woods last year, has been pretty important to stay on, which has been pretty important to stay on top of. But yeah, this is like a definition of essential. And in my mind, like our work is essential, right? It's like not only for mental health and well-being, and because it's going to be there once this pandemic sort of blows over, I think. And so it's an important piece of infrastructure, I think, to maintain. I don't know how, and we done in our, I think it's like state by state how essential services is defined. I don't know if how your state has defined it, but it's not, we don't always fit into like a neat category at all.
Yeah, so the other company I work for is an engineering company. So they are, I mean, they deal with infrastructure, so they're designated as essential pretty readily, which I'm fortunate with. And but as far I know, a lot of biological monitoring groups and companies are having a harder time unless they have a contract with a state entity that has timelines laid out and they can classify themselves as essential that way. It's hard for them.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
podcasts are apparently essential. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think just work in the field has changed as well. So it's really just, we talk about how, lack of people staying home and not going to work, like not out on the roads, has really contributed to this reduction in greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And there's like cleaner air, and Earth Day 50-year commemoration just passed this past week, and it's probably one of the maybe cleaner times in our lifetime
Right.
right now.
Yeah,
Environmental quality wise.
there's some interesting stories about Wuhan, that they've already been able to, calculate the offset of, even pollution deaths versus COVID deaths. And there's some interesting stories on like Freakonomic podcast about that. So it's affecting the world in strange ways.
Right, and it's yeah, these analyses that are coming out are fairly, yeah, are interesting. Yeah, but work in the field, like I said, we're in the, like, unfortunately, like our crews, they're just rolling around in the same vehicle together, has some potential effects on people. So, we're people are riding, either driving to sites separately, basically we're not carpooling. And so people are rolling around in, pairs, like one person driving, then the other like driving Miss Daisy in the back. It's a little strange, using separate tools like disinfecting tools. But overall, I think crews are these people working on the crews like definitely like to be outside. So it's really important for their like mental health. Like they're not indoor people and they want to, be to work. So if we can, any way we can justify ourselves as essential services, I think it's important.
Hmm.
If we can do it, as long as we can do it safely.
Right. Do you guys have mandatory masks up there?
Masks?
Uh-huh.
No, no, it's pretty optional, but I think it's
We just
becoming
started it
more.
down here.
I think just the DIY cloth masks have become pretty important, but yeah, they're not mandatory by any means right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it down there? Is it mandatory down there?
Yeah, if you're outside of your home in a spot that you cannot maintain 6 feet, or in a spot outside that you cannot maintain 6 feet distance, you have to wear a mask. And if you're in an enclosed space anywhere in public, you have to wear a mask.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense. I think it's I've seen some cool masks. I've been out in the world a couple times, a few handful of times now in the past couple weeks working and seen some very trendy masks.
I've seen some innovative approaches, like
Yeah.
people with
Got
riot helmets.
oh yeah, so I don't know if you want to plug your buffs right now, but yeah, it's very good
Yeah, go
time.
to the Resident Restoration
Buffs.
store and buy they're called neck gaiters or buffs or
Yeah.
masks.
Yeah. Or it could be a tube top if you needed to,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't. We've been talking for a while now. Anything else you want to chat about
Well,
for
I
this
think
first
that's
Instagram live?
I think that was a good run for our first attempt at this, and I think it went well. And I want to say thank you to everyone who listened.
Yeah, all a handful of you for sure, and we'll see if we can figure out how to post this for other people later on to look at. But again, this is so yeah, thanks everyone. I'm Michael, Sean, Tree Hugger, Resident Restoration. Good to see you all. Happy Sunday, and yeah, hopefully we can do this again soon. Podcasts available any podcast portal. Pretty much you can find Sean at, and then yeah, mine too. And I got a new episode coming out this week. I gotta drop it um, about drones. My drone podcast is finally coming out. Sean had one too from a couple weeks ago with the Spanish company. I'm gonna roll out this this interview I did with this Seattle-based company, and so it'd be good to compare notes.
Yeah, that I'm
Uh,
excited to hear that one.
yeah.
And I have
All
one
right.
on urban stream daylighting coming out this next week. So that's
All
from
right.
Salt Lake City with Brian Tanetti. So that should be fun.
Nice. All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm really enjoying your podcast. I'm glad. Yeah, you're staying busy, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been
All right.
great to catch up on podcasts during all this crazy
I know.
stuff.
Well, yeah, actually, just to mention it, I think my new favorite podcast just joined. So I'll just, if we can keep this going for a little bit longer, um, a friend of mine, acquaintance of mine, this new podcast in Seattle called is Growing Old. I don't know, did you get a chance to listen to it? Super cool. It's
Not yet. I have it on my list.
yeah, so it's really like this, they make these visits and chats with people in Seattle and visits to different parks in Seattle, as well as just talking about the urban forest in general in Seattle and really kind of forecasting out, really kind of using that very classic kind of human thing that we can do is like look into the future, into like the year 2070, and think about how the forest is going to change and grow with us under very under the circumstances that under COVID, but also just thinking about how fast the city is growing and trying to honor ancestors of the past and habitat and really just and really focusing on like the community stewardship of the forests and just how beautiful they are. Yeah, it's my new. I ripped through all the episodes just like in a few hours actually, and I'm waiting for another one. But yeah,
Oh, nice.
growing old. Any other podcast recommendations? I'm really like behind on my podcast. I'm really behind on my podcast listening.
I'm always behind on mine. I started listening to one called Fost, which I'm really enjoying. It's a very high developed and um, big group doing it. I can't remember who publishes it, but it's the future of storytelling. But they have great interviews, and it's all about creativity, storytelling, innovation. So I'm really enjoying that one.
All right. All right. Yeah, so no one else. I'll check that one out. Yeah, I need to get back into it. I just don't have a commute anymore, so I haven't been listening. That's why my kind of podcast numbers are sort of, yeah, the listenership is down. I just don't think people have their commutes. So,
Yeah.
one impact of coronavirus. Yeah. All right, man. So it's good to chat with you. Good to see you. I'm gonna end this first Instagram live chat.
All right.
Me
I look forward to
Sean.
doing more.
All right. Talk to you later.
See ya.